It's okay, I'll sit here. I don't know.
So, got another, I think, super interesting panel, which has been a great day. We're talking about DAOs and how you leverage DAOs for governance. And why don't you each quickly introduce yourselves so they know the angle that you're coming from?
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
Whoa.
Jonathan Karras.
I guess mine. There it is. Okay.
I'm head of community at Levana DAO. I'm a member of about a dozen other DAOs, and I've been participating in on-chain governance for the past 5 years.
My name is Nicolien Arns. I'm from Doing Good. My history is more in like offline communities, decentralized communities, and now into DAOs.
I am Daniel, as it says, head of governance at Aragon. We're the biggest platform for DAO creation, big believers in decentralization and all of that. My background is in organization design, experimental psychology, and before that I was a chef.
Okay, terrific, thanks. And I'm Luke Kerner, and I'm with Blockchain Co-Investors. We are a crypto fund of funds. So we invest in 30 of the biggest crypto VCs, and as a result, our investors are more than 400 blockchain companies. So I want to start with what, for me, and I'm sure for all of you, is an important element of why we're all here, but we all use the word community a lot. But I think it means something different to everybody. So I would just love to hear each of you kind of, within 30 seconds, give your description of community. Daniel?
Sure, thank you. For me, community is what happens, and this is a definition based on a lot of other bodies of research, really trying to have a bridging definition, so we have a common language. That is what happens when you have a network of relationships between people, and a common identity, a shared thing that you identify as, like I'm Colombian, or I'm Spaniard, or I'm whatever adjective that we start to use to create that shared identity. You bring these two things together, and you have all the properties of community, that sense of belonging, the fact that you want to be part of the tribe, defend the tribe, but also the dark side of the otherness.
Right? And we got to cap you at 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Yeah,
I could talk about it for an hour too.
Yeah, it's basically adding on to that. It's culture. Either you share culture-based values, or you share like a shared resource as well that can connect you. So there needs to be something that connects you as a community. It can be either culture or a shared resource, or whatever.
I think community are the people that show up. They're the people that care about what it is that you're building, and they're the people that, if your application or your infrastructure turned off or disappeared, they would be the people that would be upset and would work to rebuild it.
Okay, cool. Look, I think those were all great answers. I'm going to give mine, which I think is supersedes, or kind of is above your all. And I believe that a community is an ecosystem that, when it works, everybody gets more out of it than they put in.
Nice.
You would agree? So can we use that, or would anybody like to add anything to that, or as a construct?
What I would push back on is that would also include passive members. I think that there's plenty of ways that somebody can receive more than they give.
Completely agree. I think you're agreeing with me. I agree. Passive members, members that just kind of come and give their coins and stake. They're helping. The hodling is helping the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but sometimes it goes beyond what you're getting out of it yourself. Maybe that what you get out of it is something that is more for the common good. Talking about communities that actually invest themselves to make a better place, maybe for their kids or for the whatever generation. Maybe it's.
But they're doing it for, it could be for their kids, so it's not them, but they're doing it for them, what they want, right?
Yeah,
which is a better world for their kids, right?
Yeah, what they believe in.
Who doesn't want that? So, I think we got a super smart panel here who's done a lot of thinking about governance, but only one of us gets paid 24/7, I think, to think about governance. So Daniel, I'll start with you as somebody at Aragon, right? You're thinking about this all the time. How would you think about kind of the state of where we are in terms of decentralized governance?
So echoing something we discussed before, and you mentioned yourself, is super early stages. Like people start complaining of all these things that are not happening in DAOs or that it doesn't work. And he's like, well, we haven't invented it yet. Like, wait a second, guys. We start to get a little bit of voting going on. That's like approving a decision, but governance is a long process and there is a lot of things that need to happen before that. The decentralized sense making, when there is no CEO top-down authority giving you the strategy and the vision and all the things that need to happen before the individual decisions for alignment, all of that we're still in the process of making. So there is a lot to be done. And I think that quite often we have a risk to throw the baby away out with the bathwater.
So I agree with you, and we'll get to you guys in a moment. But you're pretty new to Aragon. How long you been there?
I started with them on March on a consulting capacity, officially in this title in May.
But you've been 8 years thinking about this stuff, right? So in the time now, short time you've been, what's been the biggest surprise since you got to Aragon?
The biggest surprise since I got to Aragon, that we needed to rebuild a lot of stuff.
Like everything, like start from the ground up.
Yeah, I start very much from the ground up, and we're accumulating the learnings, but also the realization, and really the really deep realization of how much we're unable to do by ourselves, and how much we need to dog food and really go like, this is about collaboration and it's about working with the community and at every single aspect. And still all the time I'm realizing that there is new nuances to that, in that community becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy the same way that centralization becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you take risks, the more you empower your people, the more the community becomes responsive and responsible to what you're doing. And in that is realizing that there is all kind of things. Like recently I started ranting about decentralized UI, decentralized UX, as another thing that even a lot of some so-called called decentralized organizations are centralizing and so on. And it's just another aspect of another thing that we need to learn to govern together rather than individually, if we're really going to make this Web3 better in all the different aspects than what Web2 and previous generations have been.
And Nicolene, when you think about governance, and I don't know if you're familiar with Aragon tools, like kind of what have been your macro lessons?
For me, it's like to really take learnings that we already know from our society of like existing ways to govern. Like here in Catalonia, there's a very rich ground for cooperatives and auto-organized organizations that actually, as like real people, there's no code, but there's a lot of learning and unlearning that we can do from there as well. So I would also look at these organizations and the structures of governance. It's more about also the maximum of people, right? Like there's this maximum of people, like a maximum amount of people. Like for example, DAOs is like, it scales up like really, really fast. So you have like this massive people voting for stuff that is close to their heart. But maybe there is like this threshold of like 150 people that you socially can connect with in like a human way, right? I mean, that's been researched. Maybe there is like formats that we can design around like smaller groups, that maybe for smaller groups it get delegated into other groups. It's just to say like, it's still a laboratory, like the baby that Danny is saying. It's like a laboratory of experimentation about these kind of systems and structures, and it's very exciting, but we should not look just to the DAOs. That's what I'm saying. We should look about what people do and how they feel connected and how they feel they want to participate, because participation is still like a thing that now is really, really.
So, we were talking earlier about your experience in the early days of MakerDAO, which is one of the early decentralized DeFi projects that scaled, but you didn't hang around that long. So why don't you tell us about that experience, what you've learned? And
absolutely, I think, well, for context, MakerDAO is an application that produces a decentralized stablecoin, and they're in the name is DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. So they were one of the first organizations that allowed for the community to vote on the future roadmap of the application and the variables, fees that were collected, limitations of the platform, et cetera. Very early on, it was community driven, and there were a lot of relatively small stakeholders that participated very actively in the governance. Over time, as more institutional investment came in, it became clear that the small fish were displaced by the whales. Whales controlled the platform and minnows were pushed to the side. So this is a fundamental challenge that I think that we're still dealing with, which is that.
And just so before we go, but what happened? I mean, so what was the implication of that for the project?
Well, what you would end up getting is that voting might be, you might end up with 1,000 people that voted to the left, but then one or two at the last minute, right before the last bell struck of midnight, large token holders would be able to vote to the right, thus swaying the vote. And that's, it disincentivizes and disenchantizes any members that's actually a community member from participating in on-chain governance.
And as a result, did the community die out?
I think that we've seen a plateau. I think that there are a number of core members that will consistently vote on every governance proposal, but for the majority, that slope that they had of gaining more members pretty much died out because it's very clear who the few VCs are that are going to control the future of the platform.
And the last question is, do you think that Andreessen Horowitz, they are who they are, right? They're a big player in the ecosystem. I think, I personally think of them as being, good people. I mean, they're capitalists. So, but do you think they learned any lessons?
Well, I think that we really need to ask the question of what's the goal of governance? And I mean, I don't want to name names of any particular VC, but I think that if you own, let's say that you own 20% of a platform, in regards to the governance tokens, that you have a right and you should be participating in governance. I think it's up to the communities and the platforms themselves to determine how to add weighting or how to add various other tactics to both balance the value that's provided by the whales, which help fund the applications, and then the influence of the core community, which could be thousands of small participants or the actual users of the platform. And I think that we're seeing a lot of really cool experiments that balance these opposing forces, but nobody's really nailed it.
Well, if you think about somebody who's trying, is Aragon. So what is Aragon doing to solve for that? I mean, when you hear that, obviously this is not a new problem.
Yeah, so one thing is that there is no wholesale solution. There is no one thing that solves them all. And there has been a lot of talk on kind of like coin voting not being appropriate. I actually agree in some cases it's not. But when we're talking here is a concept that I call the decision economy. And it's the idea that in the traditional world, we pay CEOs loads of money to make really big decisions. We pay other people less money to make smaller decisions. In Web3, we're saying a lot of the tools are assuming that all decisions are equal and we're not paying anyone to make decisions. So we're just hoping that people are going to do it for the capital appreciation. If you have loads of tokens, the capital appreciation of making good decisions can be huge. But if you have a tiny amount of tokens, if you have $100 worth of tokens and the decision is going to improve that by 10%, the decision is worth $10 for your participation. How much time can you invest for that? Very little. So obviously you have all of these communities for whom it's not economical to invest the attention span to participate, and we need to fix that. And it's not as simple as let's just pay people because then they vote at random.
I'm sorry, when you say we need to fix that, in and of itself, the more you believe, the more people who vote, the better?
Not necessarily, but I think people need to.
So then I'm sorry, then what are you fixing?
Sorry. So, well, we need to fix the economics of it so that is not plutocracy oriented. So it's not only viable for very wealthy holders to vote, but it can actually be viable for people irrespective of whether they have a huge amount or a smaller amount. Skin in the game is important, don't take me wrong, but I think the current system takes it way too far. And you can have people with tremendous expertise, with loads of context in the community, for whom it's not economical to vote or participate in governance at all, just because they are not that wealthy, or at least not that invested in your community. And we're now advancing mechanisms that can address that by essentially saying only people who have a certain level of engagement, and not based on money, but like committing time, having context, and what proxies can we use for calculate context, that's up for discussion and there is loads of details there. But as long as people have invested a minimum of time and have a good overview, a bit of context, then we can actually reward them to vote. And that way we can bootstrap minority holders to participate in governance and add their expertise. And that doesn't mean everyone will, but then we add other systems like liquid democracy and so on. And we start to, that's what I mean, no wholesale solution, but rather multiple small things that together can move us away from only the core team voting or only really wealthy people being able to vote and a few of the other issues around it.
So Nicolene, you hear that. Do you worry about gaming, or what are the other thoughts that come to you after hearing that?
Yeah, when there's tokens, when there's money incentives, there's always going to be gaming. I mean, that's just how it works. So yeah, the one of these things that Vitalik also talked about not having coin token as a voting mechanism, for me makes a lot of sense. But I would separate the two, but that is a personal opinion, not so much for I need to say. Yeah, to exactly avoid that we replicate systems that we don't really believe in. That's it's basically the wealthy have more power than people that don't have so much tokens. That's what Danny said now. So it's basically, yeah, it's a lot of unlearning really of the actual systems and analyze like, okay, we are here now. How did we get there in the first place? And if we don't want to replicate that, which is also something that for every community is completely different, right? I'm talking here about Daoism, not capitalism, but every community has their own goals. Maybe there's a DAO that wants to do something completely different in terms of governance. But what we're talking about here now and searching for this through decentralization and actually having a voice for everyone. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to fix or build upon. I will not say it's broken, but it's an organism and we're learning from each other. That's why we're sitting here. And that's why so many projects are thinking about these 24 hours. And there's a big jump here.
It's early.
Yeah.
You mentioned about do we want everybody to vote? I think that we want everyone that's informed or qualified to vote. I think that one of the challenges is, and this we see it with incentivization, is that when you either pay people to vote or give just direct compensation for voting, then everyone will vote because it serves their best interest, but you may not end up with the most effective form of governance from that.
I guess it starts kind of with what are you solving for now? So you've got a new DAO, right, that you're working on. So what is that DAO solving for, and how are you handling governance?
So at Levana, the goal is to build capital efficient pools which can create leverage exposure to any asset. Stands for leverage any asset.
So a DeFi project.
Yeah, it's a DeFi project. And the goal is, in terms of governance, is to address the whale in the minnow issue. And one of the ways that we've been thinking about this is to really mimic what we found in the U.S. government, where there is there's a form of the government which is designed for whales, and I'm talking between the House and the Senate. So one of the parties within the U.S. government, the amount of votes that you have is directly related to the cash flows that you bring to the federal government and the number of your population. Another branch is essentially, you can think of it almost as an NFT, that every state has 2 seats, and it doesn't matter how big or how small they are.
Those sound like fungible tokens.
Well, if you have 2 seats, you really can't. Well, what I mean is that you can't split them up. That if there's one person that's gets one vote.
It's a Satoshi.
Yes, it would be
the atomic
Satoshi
level of that community. Yeah,
absolutely. So what you would end up there is that creating almost a dual form of governance where there are economics incentives. There are elements which are leveraging the larger stakeholders in the platform. And then there are elements of the platform which are specifically geared to the actual users, independent of how much they might own of the platform.
So when you hear that, do you have questions about how he's running it and trying to solve?
Yeah, so, well, one thing is I'm actually struggling to hear. The sound is not helping me a lot. So Could you give me, like, if you could actually, because I'm struggling to hear you because of the sound, but could you
Yes,
frame
it is
the,
challenging.
thank you. Yeah, it's quite a bit of echo. So the challenge to solve in,
Well, as he was talking about what he was solving for, again, I mean, these are, challenges that, that you want to maybe say it, I don't even know, out louder or something so we can hear it. When you just said, real people.
What does every DAO want? It wants a lot of highly informed minnows that participate in the DAO. That's how you have a functional DAO. You don't just have 3 VCs that between them own 50% of the tokens and then just decide the future of the community. What you want is tens of thousands of community members that stay informed, that participate, and then actually are emotionally invested in a platform. So the challenge is how do you balance these two types of decision makers and create something that is effective for both of them?
sure, thank you. Fine. Got it. So first thing, a lot needs to happen for experimentation. This is a really new space. From Aragon, our official position is we're tool builders, experiment. My particular situation is being opinionated. So here is my opinion. I really believe in something called polycentric governance. That is the idea that you cannot have a single way to make decisions that is going to be good for everything, but you actually need to have different centers of decision making. In our own DAO, the way we design it is we have a main DAO that works like traditional DAOs, kind of direct democracy. Everyone can propose, everyone can vote. It's fairly basic. That's good for big decisions that involve all the community, and or governance cycle to make a transaction, it will take a minimum of 19 days. So it's kind of slow, big, and heavy. But for smaller decisions, we're now creating sub-DAOs that can specialize a little bit and have governance processes tailored for the specific domain of decision making that they can have. So when you're talking to your big VCs and so on, they're probably only interested in a few really big decisions that affect them massively. And so you can have, let's say, a protocol, a decision-making process in a sort of main DAO where they can vote on those things, but there's going to be very few decisions. Again, going back to kind of like the CEO analogy, like big, valuable decisions that probably require a lot of analysis, but it's only one decision that you make every so often, and it's quite complex and so on. You want to then, with the sub-DAOs, what we're trying to do is push decision-making to the edges, to the front, and empower people to not necessarily need context of the whole DAO, especially like our situation. We have a bunch of people who are coming into this, is kind of growing, and you cannot coordinate with hundreds or even thousands or hundreds of thousands of people for everything. So you start to break it down into kind of not hierarchies of people, but hierarchies of complexity, and people can chip in and participate in different parts if you empower them. But then you cater the decision-making process to specific things. So we have like a compliance sub-DAO, and that works with a specific decision-making process.
Just I'll talk up to make sure, well, hopefully you'll be able to hear me. So, in the time that I've been in this space, and we were talking about this, I believe that the biggest step forward we've taken early days is, like I spent a lot of time with DAO Stack, and, Matan Feld's this brilliant guy, this former, string physicist, and he was building out a whole stack, and you're building out a stack, it's like you want to create a human. And so you think, well, he's going to need a stomach. So as opposed to, I think the biggest thing that's happened in my mind is, Amin Soleimani and the Moloch DAO. And Amin said, look, none of this works. It's all great on paper, but in reality, nothing's working. So instead of like creating a human out of whole cloth, let's start with a single-celled amoeba. Can't really do much. And then let's get a 2-celled amoeba, and then a 4-celled amoeba. And so how do you, I don't know if that's, obviously you're familiar with the Moloch DAO. And
no, that resonates a lot, and is very much the path in which we're in. We in the past, and it's because the space was a lot smaller and people wanted kind of like these wholesale solutions. We tried to create something that could do quite a few different things. And we still believe all of those functionalities are needed and way more. But the approach we're taking is a lot more modular and composability oriented, and trying to be a platform where people can also integrate no code, because we need to go to the masses and not create this developer elitism. Or, obviously developers will continue to be very privileged because we really desperately need them. But
where are you guys in terms of rolling that out?
So we are rebuilding from the ground up to a good degree. We can refactor a lot of the code and so on. We're hoping to have this Amoeba launched before the end of this year of what for us would be kind of like V3.
But I
the
mean,
stack.
by definition, how long is it? How long ago did you start
With the Amoeba or with the
to build the Amoeba?
Well, I mean, it's hard to define exactly, but probably a month ago.
Okay. So, you're saying it's a 3-month Amoeba.
Yeah, exactly. And already we're like testing parts of it with community members and so on. But that would be like a fully functional Amoeba. And then very quickly like start to iterate and add more value to that, extend the functionalities, but especially collaborate with other protocols and other networks and try to integrate the whole thing together. As I was saying, at the level of the back end, at the front end, and all kind of levels.
Okay. And Nick Leadenfield, you've talked less than either one of them. What would you like to talk about now in government? What's most important to you?
I don't know. I got very excited with what you just described, because for me, it's really something that I strongly believe in. Also, I come from sociocracy, which I think you find a lot of similarities there. And to be on top of that, like also, I think when you talk about like these smaller circles, like the sub DAOs, they can also be cross DAO. They can even move from one DAO to another DAO because they have a certain expertise, they have a certain way to make decision making. So they can even be like a standalone, more autonomous way of a group of people making decisions in a certain way, and just go from DAO to DAO. I mean, this is the kind of organisms that I really believe in. And
yeah, I think what you're talking about is the kind of stuff I'm super excited right now, because I'm just like, oh my God, this is about to happen. And it hasn't like fully happened yet. We're discussing with like Bankless around an analytics project that maybe we can spin out and create this sort of autonomous cell that we also invest in a way and help incubate with resources and the other DAOs that we do. And we haven't really fully figured it out, but it's something that we're like, this is about to happen. We're thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's so exciting because it's really opening up now from what you said, the elite developers like really like doing good as well. We really want to have the users being the main decision makers on the platform. And we don't even want to be there at some point, like it's supposed to be the users that actually use this on a daily basis that should be deciding, and not just the developers or the core team. So yeah, I'm really into. We are now at the moment of constructing the DAO, so I'm really open like for everything that comes around.
Well, but
I think that you mentioned a great emphasis on users, and I think that that's where a lot of the current DAOs fall short, is that they don't view themselves as a consumer product. They don't look at the user experience from the end user perspective. In order to learn about the upcoming governance votes, you might need to start on the Medium page. And then to get into the discussion, you would go into the Discord, and then you would follow the community feedback on Twitter and Telegram. And then you would you'd participate in the initial vote on Snapshot. And then you would pay $60 in gas fee, and you'd have to do that from your home with the ledger in order to be able to actually participate on chain. So I think that rethinking, and this is probably a great opportunity, and I'm assuming that this is something that Aragon is approaching, is streamlining the awareness, education, participation into under one umbrella with a user experience that's in line with what we have become accustomed to with consumer products and mobile first products today.
Yeah. Well, so we got just a couple minutes left. Why don't we finish it? Why don't you say if there's one thing that you think people in the audience should know, they're trying to think about DAOs and governance that they don't know?
You have to try it. If you're interested in learning more about what are the value drivers of crypto, you have to actually participate. Find a community, find a protocol that has a community that engages with that community and offers them to participate, and actually show up and participate.
And even like literally, I mean, how would they do that? Like, what's step one of doing that?
Step one is to join crypto Twitter and to find projects that you like.
There's a lot going on crypto Twitter, man. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I was thinking to say exactly, just get in there and get into a community that you're passionate about and try it out, and
what was the first DAO that you got involved with?
I think it was the Apia tree.
I didn't,
I don't know. I don't remember right
Yeah.
now. I
it was a
got
while
like,
ago. Yeah.
don't worry. But yeah, it's easy to find them, you know. And now with all these NFTs going on, there's like a lot of other kind of communities. It doesn't need to necessarily to be about governance or about funds or about money. It can be about art. It can be about a lot of different domains as well. So just find your community and get in there and experiment.
Yeah.
Check out what it does.
Cool. Daniel?
For me, a thing I would live with is that governance and culture work together. Like even your own biases, your own ideas will inform the sort of governance that you end up creating and vice versa. And we really need to work on ourselves. And that's been a huge learning in terms of like personal development, mental health, the whole, even to go hippie, like the spiritual path, but really like working on our own mental models and our own mental patterns is the deep work that anyone wanting to impact governance and design governance should really be doing as well on the side. Otherwise,
right.
we're going to create terrible systems again.
Terrific. Let's give him a big hand. That was great.